We'll begin with Dan Rupley. Dan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you for hanging around. This is kind of the closing act, I guess, tonight. I'm Dan Rupley. I've been living here since 1971. I'm a lawyer, and my first job was with the Justice Department enforcing the Voting Rights Act in Mississippi back in the early 70s. So I've been around a while. Ran for Congress here in 1976. Some of you may remember that, and I came dangerously close to being your congressman. Before that, I had started an organization that challenged the utility company here, and they were overcharging people, and we managed to get some rate relief for people here in the four-state area. I am a populist in my political philosophy. The future of the middle class is very threatened by a rigged system in Washington, D.C., and it's starting to affect us in Annapolis as well. It favors large corporations and the super rich. My job, as I see it, is to look out for the ordinary people, the retirees, small businesses, the poor, and not well-heeled corporations and billionaires, the folks that my opponent represents through ALEC. I have a 5-point plan that I'd like to bring to the table, and if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I think that we need to have an educational program that would provide pre-K for everybody on a volunteer basis in this state. And I'm most impressed by a program that was initiated by a Republican governor and legislature in Tennessee. It's called the Tennessee Promise, and it provides the first 2 years of college or trade school at state expense paid for by the lottery or the casinos. I will get into my other program, I guess, as the time progresses, and I see that my time is out on my 2 minutes.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Huff, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. My name is Michael Huff. I'm a state delegate, represent Frederick and Washington counties for the last 4 years in the Maryland House. And I'd like to know who these millionaires and billionaires that I supposedly represent are friends with. Actually, Dan and I live about a mile away from each other in the town of Brunswick in townhouses. I was the first in my family, my sister and I, to actually get a 4-year degree. Right out of high school, I went in the United States Air Force and got a GI Bill. That's how I paid through my way through college. And started off when I came back to Frederick and worked my way through college at Sears selling washers and dryers. Started working for a state senator at the time doing legislation. I'm proud of some of the stuff I passed as a legislative aide, including legislation to protect women who are victims of domestic violence. In 2010, I was fortunate enough to be elected, like I said, to the Maryland House. And for the last 4 years, I've been a strong voice against the taxes and spending that are really destroying our state. And you talk about destroying the middle class. Nothing has done that more than the broken policies of Annapolis and Martin O'Malley. Tax after tax after tax. When you add it all up, it's 80 taxes and fees that have come from this governor. Over 8 years, they've increased spending by $10 billion. When we went down there, we said, just stop spending. For 1 year, give taxpayers a break, and then you don't have to raise taxes. They said no. And so I think the number one thing that is hurting the middle class are the policies of Martin O'Malley and the tax increases that are coming from the Democrats at Annapolis, whether it be the gas tax, the rain tax, the sales tax, the income tax. People are taxed out.
Thank you very much, Mr. We will now ask the same question of Mr. Well, I apologize. I just lost my train of thought. Now you've done your opening statements, I'll move on to my question. I'll be asking the same question of both of you. Our question will first go to Mr. Rupley. Dan, not to bang the same drum, I know we've talked about this a lot tonight, but it is an important question, and we have talked about the economic stagnancy in the state. What are your best and brightest ideas to help boost the economy and help create jobs and get the GDP moving again?
Well, I think that's a question that answers itself. Right now, we need to stimulate jobs by repairing our infrastructure. One of the advantages I've had is serving as an overseas trade representative from time to time, and I've seen what China is doing right now. They're putting a lot of money into the infrastructure, $700 billion. It's going to require a partnership not just between local and state government, state and federal government also. We need desperately to have an infrastructure bill passed at the national level. Unfortunately, Congress is gridlocked, and that's not going to happen, I don't think. I have a plan to sponsor an incubator program down in the southern part of the county using the East Alco facility to bring entrepreneurs to build alternative energy systems, such as solar projects and wind projects, geothermal projects, and the like. And I have several entrepreneurs that have indicated a real interest in doing that. If we could bring some jobs into our county and make it state-of-the-art types of jobs. I heard Ron Young talking about that project in Frederick, the Nexus project. It's a wonderful project. It needs to be completed, and it needs to be a model and a flagship for the rest of the country. Those are the kinds of jobs that we need.
Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Huff.
I think the role of government is not to create jobs, it's to create an environment where it's friendly for job creators to set up. So in Maryland, one thing I hear over and over again when I'm talking to business leaders or legislators from other states that are competing against us, they say, first off, like I said before, it's the taxes. The tax environment, the fact that our corporate tax is so much higher, the fact that our income tax is so much higher, this makes us very uncompetitive to the surrounding states around us. Dan and I both live in Brunswick. Brunswick has been a struggling town, and one of the reasons is because Maryland is so unfriendly on taxes. So the gas stations set up across the river, the places that sell tobacco set up across the river, places that sell alcohol, the same reason, because the taxes are low over there, and consumers will just drive across the bridge. And so unless you're going to build a moat or a wall around the state of Maryland, you just cannot continue to increase taxes. And the other thing is businesses want some sort of predictability. They want to know that if we're going to stay in the state of Maryland, what we're going to make over the next 20 years, 30 years. The problem has been that the General Assembly every single year has been completely unpredictable about what we're going to do. We go into session one year and we're talking about a rain tax, the next year it's a corporate tax. So again, we have to stop the taxes and spending. We need to elect people who will be fiscally conservative with your money. We have to start saying no to some of the spending, and that way we can stop the tax increases. That is the number one problem, both for the middle class, the people who are paying them, and it's the problem that's driving businesses out. And it's the problem that I've heard over and over again when I was going out door to door. People were telling me, you know, there was a recent poll where 40% of people said they'd leave the state of Maryland if they could. And I heard that time and time again from the doors. And it all comes back to the taxes, and again, those broken policies of Martin O'Malley and the Democrats who can't control spending and refuse to control taxes.
Thank you very much. Now's the time for me to step away from the podium and let you engage in a little debate. We're going to ask Mr. Rupley to kick us off with a question for Mr. Huff.
You are employed and you're an officer of an outfit called ALEC. ALEC pretends that it's a charitable organization, and it's not. It's actually a lobbyist for the billionaires and the out-of-state corporations that I referred to, and you know exactly who they are. You know that ALEC is largely funded by the Koch brothers and people of their ilk. You know that your agenda at ALEC has not been consistent with your responsibility to the people in this district. I think if you took a step back, you would have to consider yourself a walking, talking conflict of interest, even holding a job with ALEC while you serve as a state legislator. The way ALEC operates is they take delegates and senators from the various state legislatures, they take them on soirees. They take them on fancy holidays.
If I just might interrupt for a second, could we get to the question, please? Because
yes,
we do
and my
only have a
question
limited
is,
amount of time.
With that kind of a background, how can you justify the fact that you're even in the legislature if you're lobbying for an organization that's promoting the business interests of very large and greedy corporations?
Well, first off, I actually am not a lobbyist. There actually are registered lobbyists at Annapolis, so maybe you can ask the couple. There are actually. Delegate Sheila Hickson, who's a chairman, actually is a registered lobbyist, so maybe you should ask her to resign. I am actually not a registered lobbyist, never have been, so that's not true. Most of what you just said there is not true, but let me say this, where I work at, we do work, we're a conservative organization. I am a conservative. I've never hid that fact. I think people know that. I've been pretty outspoken in the fact of where I stand on the issues. I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican. I believe in limited government, individual freedom, and lower taxes. And the organization I work at is much like a heritage foundation at the states, where they come up with ideas. And when we do meet, not these vacations or whatever that you're talking about, we meet like there's numerous organizations out there for state legislators, NCSL, CSG, we all get together. Not a dime of mine's paid for by taxpayers. By the way, I got to wonder if you were upset about Jan Gardner taking all those taxpayer-funded trips, because I've not taken a single taxpayer-funded trip.
All right, thank you. Let's stow the applause, please.
And so I'd like to just close with, I think it's kind of funny to be sitting up here with a trial attorney being attacked for my profession. I think that's got to be a new one. But last, I just want to say this, that I think it's a positive that the group I work at, I'm dedicated to public policy, working with business leaders, trying to make policies for states that are business friendly. That's a good thing. And if you look at my record has been a successful one of passing legislation in a Democrat-controlled legislature, going in as a freshman and passing some very important pieces of legislation as a Republican. So not only have I been standing up against the taxes and spending, I've passed legislation which would prevent the abuse of children like we saw at Penn State. I passed legislation to reform our broken criminal justice system, parole and probation, which will save the state $15 million a year. Passed legislation which is expanding to the whole state to reform our parole system, which is cut by more than half the number of infractions we had and people breaking the law in the parole system. So I think my record speaks for itself, that the experience I have in state policy has really paid off.
Thank you. You have 1 minute to respond, Mr. Rubley.
Well, the ALEC legislative agenda has included voter suppression bills, stand-your-ground legislation, privatizing prisons, privatizing public schools, privatizing Social Security, legislation raising interest rates on credit cards. I don't know how that benefits the middle class. And I wonder, you call this conservative, I call it antisocial. In fact, one of the corporate sponsors that was bailing out on you, Google, last week just dropped you calling ALEC simply liars on the climate change issue. You're actually a climate change denier in the face of all of the science to the contrary.
Mr. Huff, 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, there's just so much there that's just inaccurate. I mean, look, at the end of the day, ALEC is a conservative organization. I work there because I'm a conservative. We're a part-time legislature. Mr. Rubley doesn't share many of the beliefs because he himself's a liberal. He's proudly endorsed by liberal organizations. District 4 that we're running in Frederick County is a conservative district. His views are out of line, actually far out of line with the views of the people of the district. And I think it's a simple choice going forward. I'm a conservative. I work at a conservative organization. He's a liberal. And he's up here attacking me with these left-wing positions. So I think it spells out clearly for the voters of District 4, you know, who's on their side and who sides with them on the issues.
All right, thank you. That brings us to your opportunity, Mr. Huff, to question Mr. Rubley.
Okay, well, I assume you supported Martin O'Malley the last two times. So who are you voting for governor, Larry Hogan or Anthony Brown, and why?
Well, I will support Anthony Brown. I think he's a better candidate than Larry Hogan. I think Larry Hogan is more of a serious candidate than the Republican Party has run in a great while, and I share some of his views. But when I get into the voting booth, I will be voting for the Democrat.
Well, just my response to that is, again, you know, his views are out of line with the district. This is a conservative district that we're talking about. And this is also, in Frederick County in general, the sense is people are very upset, and rightfully so, with the policies of Martin O'Malley and Anthony Brown. They see the out-of-control spending, the out-of-control taxes, and we see the $200 million we wasted on an Obamacare exchange that doesn't work. There's no accountability in Annapolis. And I think that we need to have more voices down there, dissenting views, and people like myself to try to hold the line on taxes and spending and try to push down more important, or try to pass important government reforms like I have. We don't need another blank check, a rubber stamp down there for O'Malley Brown.
I didn't come here to be a blank check for anybody, and you don't have any idea who I might have voted for in the past. You might have inquired, but you haven't been participating in this contest until today. The fact is, If you are elected, you're going to probably be one of 12 Republicans on the Senate side. You will not have the votes to block Democratic legislation. You will not have the votes to pass your legislation. And I don't know who you think you're fooling. You are a clone of Alex Mooney.
Thank
Do you
you.
think that the voters...
That brings us to Mr. Rupley, your opportunity to question Mr. Huff.
You won your party's nomination, sir, for the Senate against a very distinguished Republican state senator named David Brinkley, who's a personal friend of mine. You were roundly criticized for using lies and deceit and crass personal attacks against him that reminded many of us of your mentor, Alex Mooney. Do you think that the voters of this district really want to elect a Tea Party clone of Alex Mooney? And don't you owe the voters and Senator Brinkley and his family a sincere apology for the sleazy tactics used in the primary?
Mr. Huff, 2 minutes.
Well, I would say you've complained that I haven't debated you, and then you show up here and you're trying to debate Alex Mooney. So if you want to debate Alex Mooney, why don't you drive out to West Virginia and debate him? I'm right here. And then let me say that, I don't even know where to start on that one. So basically, if you look at my record's pretty clear. I have been effective down in Annapolis. He said, a Republican can't go down there and do anything. Well, we go down there, and first off, we represent our constituents. And our constituents have said, stop the taxes, stop the spending. If you look at my record, I've passed numerous pieces of legislation, so I have been a very effective legislator. In fact, the Weekly Standard wrote me up nationally, a national publication, about all the criminal justice reform legislation that I've done, and that I've been a national leader in a number of forefronts on issues. So I think my record's pretty clear. The Republican primary, obviously, like a lot of primaries, are contentious, but I got 70% of the vote. I think there was people that were ready for a change. And the main issues, just like the state issues, were taxes, spending, and the broken exchange. And so I think that you're seeing a lot of those issues play out again in the gubernatorial election that played out in my primary as well.
Thank you. You get 30 seconds to respond, Mr. Rupley. 1 minute, I'm sorry.
Well, the way I see it, if you get elected, and the numbers certainly favor you regarding the makeup of the district, I think you're going to go to Annapolis and simply isolate us from the rest of the state. I don't think that you will have the support on the Senate side to do anything, to either block the Democratic agenda or pass your own legislation. And I think that David Brinkley represented what we needed in this state, in this district. He was a guy who represented a conservative point of view, but he also knew when to cross the aisle and bring things home to his district. And I would agree with what Gene Stanton said earlier, that if you get elected, much of what we would ordinarily be getting through state budgetary process is going to be going somewhere else.
30 seconds.
Well, basically, putting the rhetoric aside, and again, just looking at my record, if you look at 2 years ago, one of the issues I worked on was mental health reform, something that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. And actually, I worked with the majority leader at the time, Senator Rob Garagiola from Montgomery County. So I have, of course, like I said, stood my ground on taxes and spending, but I have constantly looked across the aisle at issues that we can work together on. And that bill actually passed unanimously, as many of my bills have, through the Senate. And so I think you'll find very few freshmen, Republican or Democrat, that have as an effective record as I do of passing real, meaningful reforms through the state of Maryland.
Thank you very much. Mr. Huff, it's now your opportunity to question Mr. Rupley.
Has Obamacare and the Maryland Healthcare Exchange been a good thing or a bad thing for Marylanders?
Well, I think the passage of the Affordable Care Act is becoming less and less of a contentious issue. It's starting to work in a lot of places. It was badly goofed in Maryland. It was badly goofed by my party. I take responsibility for that as a Democrat. But I had nothing to do with the process. I see very little that I could do or that you could do to affect the Affordable Care Act from a standpoint of being a state senator. It is what it is. It's been enacted. The glitches that cost us so much money to fix are being repaired, and I think it's going to be delivering something that people will learn to rely on, and it will reflect what's happening around the country.
And you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, I would just say I think it's been a bad thing for Maryland. And in fact, the state of Maryland, we do have a lot to do with Obamacare. It's not just a federal issue. So in fact, the state of Maryland decided on its own to do a state exchange. And myself, and actually I was joined, this was bipartisan, Congressman John Delaney actually supported my legislation, which would have gotten rid of the Maryland exchange when we started to see the problems with it and just gone to the federal exchange. It would have cost us nothing to go to a federal exchange. Instead, the state of Maryland sunk over $200 million of state and federal money that is completely lost in this exchange. And in order to set up the new one, they're going to the state of Connecticut, and they're going to do another $50 million. So we're talking about, we're at $250 million here for a product that we don't even know that'll work. And this is the kind of broken policies we're seeing from Annapolis, and I think this is why we need a change. This is why I'm supporting Larry Hogan for governor, and I think, quite frankly, we need more dissenting views down there. Monopoly rule has given us these kinds of broken policies where you waste $250 million and nobody can show any accountability of what happened to the money.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Mr. Rupert.
Well, I think that when you have a majority the way we Democrats have in this state, we have a special responsibility to play fair, and I don't think we always have, particularly when it comes to reapportionment. And if we were to have a fair way of realigning our districts, there probably would be more Republican representation in Annapolis. I don't believe in a system that allows any party in any state to put their thumb on the scale. And I would be advocating a new policy in terms of the way we reapportion our states.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of where you gentlemen can question each other. I get the final question here, and that final question first goes to Michael Huff. Mr. Huff, where should we look to diversify our economy? And I know we've mentioned the reliance on the federal economy here to boost our finances. And where can we improve, other than the federal government in particular, what industries could you support in order to help improve the economy, and why?
I think the big one that's disappointing that Maryland has not moved forward on is you see a real revolution going on in this country. I mean, something that's really shocking is that America is becoming energy independent, and that we are, within the next 5 years, going to basically not have to import any more oil from Saudi Arabia or these people. And why? Because of fracking, because of what's going on there. And people don't understand one of the big reasons is you've got the Marcellus Shale that sits all underneath western Maryland. But while you've got other states like Pennsylvania and West Virginia all tapping into this, and it's not just energy, it's jobs, it's revenue. When the fracking companies come into these places, a lot of times they build brand new roads, and the revenue is, we're talking millions of dollars revenue. In fact, it's so much in the state of North Dakota, they're talking about getting rid of their property taxes. They're talking about eliminating taxes altogether. This is a technology that the EPA has looked at and said it's safe. This is something that will enrich a lot of people in western Maryland who have mineral rights under their land. And yet, instead of just allowing this to go forward, not giving them any special treatment or anything like that, just allowing this to go forward like so many other states have, Maryland has completely stopped it. And this is a technology that's revolutionizing American energy, while at the same, and produces a lot of natural gas, which, by the way, is a very clean, environmentally friendly source of energy. You could run cars and buses and things like that on there. Instead, the state of Maryland has decided to play investor and is charging you a surcharge on your electric bill to build windmills out on the eastern shore, which all the private investors looked at and they said, that's a bad bet. We don't want to do that. So I think on the area of energy, we just need to let the market go forward. Now, of course, we need to do it in a safe way and make sure the technologies are safe. And I've certainly been outspoken for my district and my constituents when I thought something wasn't safe. I've crossed party lines at times. When they were going to build an incinerator here, I opposed that. And so I didn't think that was a good way to do it. I didn't agree with that environmentally. But I think fracking is something that we're really missing the boat on. And it's a shame that we've chosen to subsidize this wind energy while at the same time not even allowing the fracking to go forward.
Thank you. Mr. Rupert.
Yeah, energy alternatives are my passion, and I think that we're very, very much behind the 8 ball here in the United States and in Canada. As we speak, a very dark and kind of cold country, Germany, is now producing 20% of its energy from solar and from wind. We come nowhere close to that. That's not just the future, that's the present. That's where we ought to be right now. That's where we ought to be putting our resources. We shouldn't be burning anything. The Creator gave us a lot of free stuff. The winds that blow all the time, the sun that comes up just about every day. We can be capturing this and running our cities and our homes with this energy, and we need to be very proactive about it. And that's where the real energy independence occurs.
Very good, thank you. That brings us to our closing statements for this evening. We will kick off with Michael Huff. You have 1 minute to sum up for us.
Well, being a fiscal conservative in Annapolis can be difficult at times. It can be a voice in the wilderness. But, you know, when I go out, first time I ran for office, I knocked on 10,000 doors, probably knocked on 20,000 doors this time. So when I went down there, I felt I had a firm grip on what my constituents wanted. And I stayed in touch with people the whole time I'm down there. I feel I'm very representative of what the district wants, and that they are upset with the out-of-control taxes and spending, the $250 million waste on Obamacare websites and things, that we need to have real accountability down in Annapolis. We need to have real debates, real differing opinion, and that the one-party state monopoly has broken this state, and we can look around and we can see the evidence daily, whether it's Bechtel leaving, BP Solar leaving, company after company leaving. The jobs are leaving, we're getting less in our paychecks, all because government can't responsibly balance its checkbook like you do every single month. And we need real change in Annapolis. I'll continue to do that while continuing to advocate real reforms and pass real legislation, which I've been one of the leaders on out of basically any of the newly elected people the last 4 years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rupley, 1 minute.
Our people are divided more along partisan lines than any time in my 70 years on this earth. I think it's a great shame, and I think the country is suffering from it. Part of it has to do with the rise of the Tea Party, which has not helped anything at the national level, and it's not even helping us at the state level. There is a place at the table for the state senator from District 4. I don't think that my opponent can fill that place. His extreme agenda and his relationship with ALEC precludes that. It's going to reduce him to being a professional whiner. It's going to be a kind of a reprieve of high taxes and all the rest. I am a uniter, and my models for good legislation are Senator Charles Mack Mathias and Senator David Brinkley, and that will be the model that I will use if I get elected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause now for that. Time up on stage. And that wraps up our forum for tonight. We hope it was of some value and also for this year. So don't forget to check out tonight's video on the Frederick News Post webpage.